Thank you so much for joining us. We are the Whistle Blown Podcast, our very first live stream, a late night live stream, reacted to the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Dallas Cowboys 24-0. This is a post game reaction. I am your host, Christian. I am joined by my co host, Douglas Allen. We're here to talk about this game. Before we do, if you have not already, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, as well as comment on this video. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts on this game. Let us know whether you agree, disagree. Share this video if you haven't already as well. Douglas, my friend, before we jump into this game, how you been? How's everything been going with you?
I'm good. Football season is back. We had a very good, first game into the year, very competitive, back and forth game, and I'm ready for football season. I'm ready for it to be here. It's exciting season, and we're finally here.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I am very excited to have football back myself, just like I know you are. And what better way to kick off the season than the game that we saw tonight? This game, from start to finish, I personally loved the physicality that we saw from both teams. I thought offensively and defensively for both teams, it was very entertaining. And in my opinion, while a lot of people would consider the Philadelphia Eagles to be the better roster, I thought offensively, the Dallas Cowboys were hanging in there. They were making, some really nice strides. They had some nice drives going for them. Dak looked good coming off of the injury. And then, defensively, how were they going to look without Micah Parsons? How are they going to look with Clark in the lineup? And, we're definitely going to dive into it, but I thought that they had some moments where, you can kind of hang your hat on what you saw from the defense today. But ultimately, I mean, I thought this was a classic NFC East game, hard hitting game. And again, from start to finish, I mean, the physicality from both teams. I mean, you really love to see these kind of games. At least me personally.
Yeah, it was a very back and forth game, and you saw that was towards the beginning of the game. Cowboys go down, score, Eagles match, and you just see two teams, two divisional foes, just duking it out. You did see some penalties, some sloppy plays here and there, but it's the first game of the year. Some starters that didn't play in there, still getting their feet wet, still getting used to it, but it was a very entertaining game. You saw, like I said, you saw two teams duking it out, division rivals. Games are always close. You saw a Dallas team that came in and heard all the noise that without Micah, they weren't going to be much defensively, but they stood tall. They gave up some runs early in the half, and then they buckled back down in the second half and was able to get some stops and everything. And it was a it was a very back and forth game, a very entertaining game, probably a more surprising game for most people. Especially in Dallas's case of what were they going to look like defensively without Micah.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. I thought this was a very entertaining game, and there were going to be some questions going into this game. One, how is Dak going to look coming off of the injury? How is the defense going to look for the Dallas Cowboys without Micah in the lineup? How is the defense for Philadelphia going to look like when you have as many pieces on their defense leaving a free agency as they did? As well as how are they going to look coming off of a Super Bowl championship, where most teams, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, tend to typically I guess go through a Super Bowl slump, if you will. But personally, I mean, just starting with the Eagles, um, I want to start a little bit negative here. There were some things to this game from the Philadelphia Eagles that I left away with that it's only one game, but I could see this being an issue later down the line if it's not adjusted. And first off, I'm going to start with the secondary. For me personally, cornerback two and cornerback three looks like a real liability for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know how long Vic Fangio is going to deal with a Dory Jackson in the lineup. He just looked like a complete liability out there. And Dak was having his way against the Philadelphia secondary where, again, like, I just mentioned, how is this defense going to look when you have so many pieces that have left in free agency, whether that's Josh Sweat to Arizona or Milton Williams to the Patriots? And now you have Jalen Carter, who I'm sure we'll talk about as well, not in the lineup because he gets ejected before you can even play your first down. How are they going to look? And Dak, at moments, if not a lot of this game, had his way with this secondary. And CD, he's going to want some of these moments back. He had 4 drops, 2 of them that I thought were considered game-changing moments that could have really changed, in my opinion, maybe not the outcome, but at least maybe changed the momentum of what their offense was headed towards, especially in the second half. But outside of the secondary, before I pass it to you, I just want to touch on this really quick. One thing that I thought was alarming was how AJ Brown only gets one
Yeah.
target this entire game. And I looked at the minute mark, and it was at a minute and 42 seconds where he gets an 8-yard pass. That is completely unacceptable. And you can sit here and say credit to Matt Eberflus for drawing up, a game plan where, we're going to force Jalen Hurts to, throw the quick ball. We're not going to give you time to, throw to AJ Brown downfield or Devonta Smith. But for me, it's unacceptable. And I don't think the Philadelphia Eagles, are going to want to have another situation similar to what they had last year, where you have AJ Brown reading a book on the sidelines. I don't think it'll get to I don't think it'll get to that point. But I thought it was worth noting because outside of that big play to Jahan Dotson and outside of that play to AJ Brown, they averaged 7.7 yards per reception. And it may seem like a lot, but there were moments where their offense seemed fairly stagnant, and they have a play here and there that breaks them out. But for me, those are some of the things that I kind of left away with from the Philadelphia Eagles. What about you, Doug?
Yeah, I think you definitely harped on it in the secondary. You saw, that lack of Darius Slay being there was an issue. Dory Jackson was abysmal, and in the nicest way to say it, he was a liability out there. You saw Bennett come in and have a couple plays, and was kind of surprised after an admission that they went back to Dory Jackson because Bennett actually had a couple solid plays and there was playing a little bit better. Quinion was up and down. I thought Cooper was fine, but you seen single handedly, the when you take Jalen Carter out of this or out of this defensive line, there was a lot of things that were different. This Dallas team, did have a couple good run plays against Philly. They scored 2 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. The secondary looked like a secondary that's trying to mesh after losing some pieces. I thought the pass rush was pretty solid. They still had some players out there. I thought Uche was looked good off the edge. Hunt had a couple plays. Nolan Smith was the pass rush will still pass rush, but the secondary definitely was an issue, and it was referring to AJ Brown was the same question mark that I had on the Eagles coming into this year was how are they going to look this first year with the new coordinator, with a new offensive coordinator, with AJ Brown not getting any targets. It was a very big thing of like when you watched the game, like you said, other than the big play to Dotson, a lot of it was a lot of dinking and dunking, a lot of running with Saquon, a lot of Jalen Hurts save us because you have nowhere to throw the ball. Even when he had that touchdown, you could see him roll out to the right, covered across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it looked very similar to, after they went to the Super Bowl and they lost both offensive and defensive coordinators. The next year, their offense was, what are we? Their identity wasn't there. When Kellen Moore came in, they installed identity when Saquon came in, and they were like, we're gonna run, we're gonna hit some big plays, and it like we said, it is the first game. It is the first game, but it was very telling at times of what are we doing when we have one of the best 1-2 punches and wide receivers And
Yeah.
Jahan Dotson is the one that, looked like the best wide receiver out there because he was the only one, getting these plays. And even then, he ended the game with like 3 catches.
He
Um,
didn't have much. No.
yeah. And it just looked very, even though they were marching down the field, it was Saquon, was doing what people thought they were going to be able to do against Dallas. He was going to be able to run the ball. And every time they got him on third down, I don't know what they were doing Dallas wise. They never spied. Jalen Hurts had every opportunity to just run and get the first down, and it was the run game that was carrying them. But you saw it, when it was 4 minutes, and the Eagles have time to chew the clock, and they couldn't get it, and their offense was not the offense that we saw last year. And I know there's going to be some, you know, feeling game. Some, we have to feel this out, see where we are and everything, and build up to where we want to. But it is going to be interesting on how this offense is going to be this year based off of what we saw today in a defense that everyone was writing off, and they were in the game with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought there was some things that you said that really hit home. First things first. Again, when you look at the Philly defense, when you look at the Cowboys defense, I mean they are, don't get me wrong, they're both talented in their own respect. However, Philly's defense is the defense that a lot of people consider to be the better defense. And without Jalen Carter, I mean, don't get me wrong, they were getting pressures, but outside of that, it just seemed like they didn't have that premier player on their defensive line to get to the quarterback, which typically they have some guys on their line, whether that's Graham, who's not there anymore, Brandon Graham, or them having Fletcher Cox, or them even having Josh Sweat, who I think a lot of people kind of underrate. Josh Sweat is, in my opinion, a very underrated edge rusher. I think his time in Philly, he was dominant, and I think his presence was missed today. And the same could be said with Micah Parsons and this Dallas defense. There was moments where they were getting pressure, but they weren't getting home, and you could really see that. That's going to be the storyline this year for the Dallas Cowboys, is that their defense, they'll be able to get some pressure on you, but obviously with Micah not being in the lineup, they're not going to have that guy that's going to be able to come up there and finish plays. There's some moments where you saw Dante Fowler getting back there, but just completely blowing his assignment or just missing a tackle. And he had a good year for Washington last year, so I'm not going to get too low on him, but I've personally spoken to a buddy of mine who excuse me, a diehard, Chicago Bears fan. And I remember when Matt Eberflus was the head coach for the Chicago Bears and him telling me that, Eberflus is just very stuck in his ways. He can be very ignorant and arrogant to his defense and what he likes to call. And like you said, Doug, I mean, there was so many moments where I'm just like, can someone spy Jalen Hurts? I mean, and credit to Jalen Hurts. I mean, he had himself a solid game. I mean, I personally thought that he looked great in the pocket. He was able to manipulate the pocket. He looked great coming out of the pocket and extending plays, whether that was with his legs, whether that was with his arms. He looked up to par today, and I got to give him a lot of credit. But at the same time, there were so many moments I'm looking at this Dallas defense, and I'm just like, why are we not having somebody spy Jalen Hurts? It's like, if I'm Nick Sirianni, I'm saying to myself, you're not going to spy Jalen Hurts? Okay, I'm going to give you a reason to regret it. And I think when you go into week 2, which they'll be playing the New York Giants in Arlington, they're going to be saying to themselves, okay, the next time we play a quarterback, whether it's like Jalen Hurts, whether if it's like Jaden Daniels, we need someone to be able to spy on the quarterback, because that really hurt our defense, who really can't afford to be on the field as long as they were tonight, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, and you saw it with Dallas. You think if just some of those plays, that they get back, if they can contain Jalen Hurts, they were showing that they can go up and down the field with Philly. It wasn't like they were going to the line with fear in their heart of Philly's defense. They were going up and down, and CD was making Adoree look like, why are you on the field with me? Okay, he was unstoppable for him, and you seen that that defense, play better, but are better than what we would expect, but the containment on Jalen Hurts just wasn't there. It's every time there was like, oh, like you were saying, they would get pressures, but they wouldn't get home. And when they would get close, Jalen, like you said, maneuver in a little pocket, scrambling out, would get that first down, keep his offense on the field, and Philly would be able to go down, match him with points, and keep the game alive. And you're correct. I do feel like that is something that going in, they're going to have to really look at who is going to be the guy to help us spy and contain, or is this going to be an issue that leaks? Because last year they had an issue stopping the run. And this year, or this game, wasn't terrible. It was starting
Yeah.
off, not good. But, two half times, they were able to talk it over and figure something out. I thought at the end of the game, they had a couple crucial stops.
Hmm.
And um, we're far better against the run, but you still have your question marks with this defense on where they're going to be able to get these productive sacks and get hit home, because with Micah's presence, he was that person that finished, and now you're going to look at yourself and say, who is going to be that guy, or who's going to be the guys that step up.
Absolutely. And even with Jalen Carter in the lineup, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you still have to ask yourself that question. And the good thing is that if you are Philadelphia, you do have the talent to kind of make up for it. And from a draft pick perspective, you do have enough capital to address that position, not just this year, but next year as well in the draft. And they'll be fine. They have Howie Roseman, the best general manager in the NFL. They will be more than fine. But it's still worth noting. Um, and I got to give a lot of credit to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm one who I have them personally finishing in fourth place in the division, but a lot of it is really based on the unknown of Schottenheimer, where you have McCarthy, who, granted, had back-to-back 12-win seasons. Unfortunately, was never able to get over the hump. You have a guy who's unproven. Someone who I think you and I could both agree probably wouldn't have gotten a head coaching opportunity anywhere else other than Dallas. Probably not even another coaching job in the NFL. At least this year, I could see something like that happening. But I thought for a first performance, I mean, I thought they looked good. I thought especially the offense. You saw, what this offense is looking to do. I thought Dak Prescott, attacking downfield to George Pickens early and often. I thought that was something that, you know, was really nice and refreshing to see, because the Dallas Cowboys really haven't had that in their offense. They haven't had that element to their offense in quite some time. They tried getting that with Brandon Cooks, who's a little older on the tooth. It's not the same. Right now, you have George Pickens, who many consider to be the best deep ball threat in the NFL. But in my opinion, I think seeing that and seeing how early and often Dak was trying to connect with George Pickens, I believe one of them I believe one of them equated for a PI against Quinyon Mitchell. And I think we're going to see more of that this year. I think we're going to see a lot of big plays downfield. They're still getting acclimated with each other, the two of them, and I'm excited to see how that relationship goes, because I don't expect CD to have the game that he had today every single game. I think he'll look back at this and want this kind of a game back. But if I'm Cowboys fans, I mean, I'm feeling kind of excited with how George Pickens looked tonight. And even though from a statistical standpoint, it may not look like anything impressive, you saw what they're trying to do with him. And I think that's worth being excited about.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on both teams on the trenches offensively. I thought Dallas's offensive line was holding put against the Eagles D line for the most part. You saw a lot of those young pieces that they had, and they had some injuries in the offseason, and I thought they were, standing up to the task for most part of this game. And that's something definitely for Dallas to hang their hat on and say, the I liked where we were going with this offensive line. And then when we talk with Philadelphia, we saw Dickerson come out, Jurgen slide in, and then now you have two guards, and you could see the difference between the two guards situation when Landon went out, and the lack of being able to get that push up front to let Saquon and to open those holes for Saquon. You saw a lot of, you know, no yardage gain, some TFLs in the second half, and going forward, is that going to be an issue for Philly that we don't really see before? Usually, they could just plug somebody in and that offense keeps going. How is the health of a Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson going to be going forward into the season? And if they do miss some time, how are we going to change this offense? Are we going to change this offense? Are we going to keep trying to go? Because, like you said, one AJ Brown's not going to be happy having only one catch a game,
No.
no matter what if they're winning. So you're going to have to scheme up some things and get AJ Brown the ball. And if your run game isn't working, but you can get some pass protection, maybe we're going to start airing this thing out. And like I said, that's the big question mark we have on the new OC for Philly on what is their identity going to be. Are they still going to be leaning heavy on Saquon, or are they going to have a more balanced attack? And right now, it seemed as if they wanted to pass the ball, they just couldn't pass the ball. And
Yeah.
is that a play calling issue, or do we give credit to Dallas's secondary? Because
Yeah.
I think it very well could be both. I do think that Dallas' secondary played well. I do think there were some plays that you're looking at it and you're not getting open, and then you're running or you're running the ball and you're not running it like they did. I mean, Saquon had 18 rushes, um, and towards the end you could see. I mean, they threw on second, which I guess they're trying to outsmart the defense in a way because usually you run, and then on third pass. So I thought that was a little bit different, but it was a little bit different style than we saw last year with Kellen Moore at the helm. They ran a lot. They really dug in with Saquon, and it's a question on is this what this offense is going to look like, or is this a thing where you try to try a little different because of the AJ Brown situation last year. And if that's what you were trying to do, you didn't do a good job at it because
No.
one catch for 8 yards is not going to make him much more happier.
At all.
And I don't think it's an issue with their corners not being able or their wide receivers not being able to get open. You have a great wide receiver room. But it is a division game, and these divisional games tend to be played close because they see each other a lot. They know a lot of
Oh,
these
yeah.
tendencies. So it's once they get out of the division, how does this offense open up in an unfamiliar place, where it's not a division foe who, could play you well even if they're not up to your, talent wise.
Hmm.
So it's something we'll look to keep unpacking after that, after this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is something that's worth monitoring because, you know, how was their offense going to look with Kellen Moore being with the New Orleans Saints? How was it going to look? While you still do have, the main focal point, right? Right. So you still have AJ Brown, you still have Devonta Smith, you still have Goddard, you still have the offensive line. Granted, Landon Dickerson was injured, so that's going to play a factor into it. But how are you going to look? And we have seen whether it was for stretches last year, whether it was just 2 seasons ago, where offensively they were in a slump. They still went to the playoffs, but they were in a slump. How are they going to look? And I think they'll get things going. I think they'll be okay. As long as their trench play is fine, the Philadelphia Eagles will be fine. And that goes for both sides of the ball, which I think that perfectly transitions to Jalen Carter, who this was someone who I've seen some places, whether it's Pro Football Focus, put Jalen Carter as someone who they think could win Defensive Player of the Year. This is something that you don't want to see from your player. This is something that you don't want to see from your star player, let alone. Um, I know that there's been different angles of, the Jalen Carter incident that had been released that we saw throughout the game. Looks like Dak Prescott might have spit in his direction first, which led to Jalen Carter approaching him, and then spit landing on Dak Prescott, which then led to Jalen Carter being ejected before the first play of the game, essentially. Um, and this is something that Jalen will learn from. I don't think it was anything malicious or anything like that, but this is something that you can't do. Um, this is a big no no. I mean, and this is just a no no in life in general. You never spit on somebody. You spit on the ground, and you spitting on someone. You telling someone that you're lower than the ground. So it's like I don't think there was any malicious intent behind it. We know that tensions were high. This is a rivalry game, um, especially between the Cowboys and the Eagles. Things always get heated between those two. I could tell you from experience, but it's still unacceptable. And even though the Philadelphia Eagles did win this game, his presence was heavily missed on that defensive line.
Yeah, it's one of those incidences is coming into this year, you've seen all the change, especially on that D line. Jalen Carter being young is now going to be placed and thrust into that thing of you are our guy. Okay. And you have to be smart. In that incident you've seen in the game, for sure it was a special teams play. You see three flags fly, both flags Dallas. And I'm pretty sure Dallas people are thinking, "Oh, what happened?" They ripped the helmet off of our player. But it is the second act that always draws the foul, and that's what happens. If even if they saw him spit on the floor, he spit on the floor. That is things that people do. When you go and spit on another man, that is a different thing, and that's going to get you kicked. And now, being that guy in the locker room, being that voice on the D line, you can't make those mistakes. You are the one that the younger players now are going to look up to. You have to set a tone. You have to set a standard. And everyone's human. We all have our things, and sometimes we get a little bit hot headed. But this is before the game. This is you haven't even played a snap. You haven't even really got your feet wet and really started digging into this rivalry and getting things going. But it's just one of those things that is going to have to be a learning thing, something that someone is going to have to pull him to the side and say, hey, you are our guy now. You are the veteran now on this line. You need to step up and show and lead by example. And I think, it's definitely something, they get it because all the question, it's definitely something he could do. Sorry, let me finish my sentence. And you've seen him coming when he came into the league. He had question marks. That's why he fell. And you didn't have any issues with his rookie year. You didn't have any off the field. You didn't have these things that came to fruition that people thought might happen. Um, and you just take this game, you put it behind you, and you say, I got to learn and maintain my cool so that I can also teach the younger guys that are now on this defensive line what the standard is in the locker room and in the game.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree with you. At this point, you're no longer a rookie. You are considered a vet in this locker room. You are going to have people looking up to you, whether that's rookie, whether that's vet, because you're not just any vet. You are considered someone who many believe, that you could be a superstar. You could be one of the best at your position. You currently already are. And this is something that, it's unacceptable. It's completely avoidable. This only hurts your team. And he's young. He's going to learn from this. I don't see this situation, really playing out like this again. But if I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, one thing that I know that Jalen Carter has been vocal on was that when they drafted him, when they had guys like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, those were guys that Howie Roseman specifically made sure to put around Jalen Carter to provide that veteran leadership and show, hey, this is how we do things here. This is the level of maturity that you need to have to be a Philadelphia Eagle, to be the leader in the locker room that you were drafted to be. And again, I don't think we'll see this kind of issue going forward, but it is something worth monitoring, especially if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, because this really could have costed your team. Thankfully, the Philadelphia Eagles were able to get themselves a W and not really have to worry about that for this week. But they can't risk not having Jalen Carter on the field, especially when you don't have someone that could be that premier guy to help your defense out when your secondary looked pretty vulnerable. You need someone that can help get to the quarterback quicker to then, in turn, help your secondary out just a little bit. Doug, I wanted to ask you something because maybe it was just me, but I thought, it was a little bit egregious today. For me personally, I just thought the referees today were on one. I really thought from the Jalen Carter incident on, I mean, they were just very quick to
Yeah.
throw a flag, whether it was for the Dallas Cowboys, whether it was for the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is something that it's nothing new. It feels like every single year the flags increase. And the fans will complain. It's something that, the NFL knows about. I'm sure they're more than aware of fans, whether it's people like me, whether it's, the thousands upon thousands online who have voiced their, disdain for how it really feels like the refs kind of make the games about them. And I let me make this very clear, and I want to pass this to you. I never try to be the person that blames things on the refs. I think if you have a good team, you have a good team. If you have a bad team, you have a bad team. Bad teams make bad decisions and bad mistakes. Uh, but there are times where, the refs can really cost you a game. We've seen it time and time again throughout the years. And I'm not saying that the refs costed any of these teams the game today, but I will say that the amount of flags that were thrown today, I mean, for week one, and I'm sure as the weeks go on, they'll kind of temper things down a little bit. But for week one, I mean, it just felt almost egregious, Doug. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just
No,
me.
there definitely was some things, and it's a for me. I guess it would be a. I guess I'll just phrase it, or I'll just explain as I go. With Nolan Smith, when he had, I'm pretty sure it was a TFL, and he did his little flex afterwards, flag taunting. I hate that. I hate that basically in the NFL that they turned you into I can no longer express myself. I can no longer be happy. I just have to tackle you and then go back to my side of the ball. I hate that. It wasn't something that was like egregious. It wasn't something that drew on. He stood there, flexed, flag. And then you give Dallas's offense, you know, a possession to keep going. I didn't like that call. I thought there was times where maybe this just shows on it's a different era, but the flag on Blankenship when they were like defenseless receiver, had he had caught that ball, where was he supposed to hit him to jar the ball loose. I'm like, he can't come up and tickle him. He has to do something. And, we get into this thing of like, oh, in different times, different eras, that's legal. And I didn't see, he didn't hit him in the head. He didn't lead with his head. He led with his shoulder to the top of his chest. And they're like, oh, well, he's a defenseless receiver. And I just don't know what we're supposed to do in that situation. It's like when you
Yeah.
sack the quarterback now, you almost have to lay him down for a nap. I don't understand it. And there was times. I mean, there was a call on the a no call, and I'm fine, because I thought later when the crowd reacted, I definitely thought that it was a just hands before Hurts went out of bounds. But there was another one when Hurts went out of bounds, and it definitely was out of bounds. Then a shove into the reporter, and I'm like, look, if that's how we're going to call it, make sure that that's how we call it the whole game, though. And it is another instance. We've had these things that have started progressing year in and year out with the flags of I don't really like that. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of it just has to do with the era of football we're playing in now. That is, I guess, soft. Well, I would. They think soft. I think for sure soft because not being able to
I
express
agree.
yourself after you make a touchdown, after you make a big play, that is like to me that's egregious. Like, how are we not going to be as football players express ourselves when we're doing something that when we do something good, when we're producing, when you hit somebody, oh, you hit him too hard. This is football, okay? What are we talking about here? And though in those incidences, I don't like those flags. There's a couple of them, obviously, in this game. When you get flags, and I remember I'm watching and I'm like, ooh, they going at it. Oh, okay, this is a rivalry game. This is when you start putting your hands together and you're like, okay, this is football. Those ones are okay. That stuff happens. Yeah, but I just feel like nowadays there's just almost every game you watch where you watch and you go, no, I don't really like that call.
Oh, realized I was muted. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, some games that we've seen throughout the years where, again, I mean, for me, the most egregious one is definitely, the Saints and Minnesota one. Excuse me,
Yeah,
Saints and the Rams one from a couple years
yeah,
ago. But it does feel like every single year there is one or two games where you're just kind of like saying to yourself, what is going on here? Like, and I feel like every team experiences it. Every team has experienced a game where you're saying to yourself, God damn, the refs were horrible today. And I'm not sure, and Doug, you could definitely tell me. I'm not sure if it's like it for basketball or if it's like this for any other sport, but I believe, for the NFL, the refs aren't full time. A lot of them are full time. They're full time in other aspects in their life of what they do. Like I know that there's two refs that are like lawyers, and they're like full time lawyers, or like one of them, I believe she's like a teacher. So it's
mm-hmm.
like, they're not full time NFL referees, which I feel like would help the game. But ultimately, I agree with you. I feel like, the NFL is heading in a direction where it's just you're stripping these players from expressing themselves where they put so much time just to get a single sack, just to be able to get that first down, just to be able to get into the end zone, whether it's a 50-yard bomb, whether it's a 1 yard QB sneak or a halfback dive. I mean, these players put in so much throughout the week just to be able to get on the field and have a chance to, really help their team win. And, you flagging them for whether it's making a gesture, whether it's doing a celebration in the end zone. For me, I never understood it. I've never been for it. For me, I think it's really stupid. This is the entertainment business. You should have your players be able to express themselves and have the audience receive it as entertainment. I mean, it's unfortunate that we'll never see another Chad Johnson, someone that was a true entertainer. But the league is headed to a point. I mean, and this is a whole other conversation when it comes to streaming and how hard it is to stream a single game. But the league is getting to a point where, you know, these players can't even do anything without a single fine, being implemented to them or it being taken out the game and it being considered a flag. It's just egregious. It's stupid. I really wish Roger would do something about it, but we know the NFL is about their money, so we know that nothing's really going to change. So,
Yeah, and
it
it's
is what
gone
it
into
is.
that thing there. You can have a game and then after the game get fined for something that you didn't even get flagged for. And then next thing you know, you're paying fine money for something you didn't get flagged for. And it's just something where, a lot of people are having these conversations of whether it's NFL or NBA. Because even in the NBA, they have issues with, players can sit there and get a foul called on them. And they just do something like, man, technical. And I'm like, for showing that I was, upset with myself. Like, how is that an issue? And I'm like, you are here to ref the game, not control the game, not to put your hands on the game. We as the players are supposed to have our hands on the game, and it's just a lot of like ticky tackness. And sometimes it gets hard to watch when you're just sitting there and you're like, hey, just let them play. And so hopefully, we've been saying, I feel like it's a broken record. Hopefully, they get it situated. We've been doing this for years, but I feel like it's every year there's okay, well, now you can't do this. Now you can't do that. And that's why they call it the no fun league. Um, and hopefully it's something that they definitely get taken care of.
Absolutely, they have to, and I mean, it's only, in my opinion, hurting the product of what we see. I mean, it's almost like they want them to get a first down or score a touchdown and just run straight back into the huddle. And it's like, it's not as entertaining. I feel like if these players were able to express themselves, if they're really about money, if they're really about the bottom dollar, if these players were able to express themselves not and know that they weren't going to get penalties for it or they weren't going to get fines from it, some of these players would come up with some of the most genius celebrations, which I feel like would then in turn have more people tuning in, which would then in turn make the league more money. But what do I know, Doug? I'm
Well, yeah,
just a guy behind the
you
screen.
used to watch touchdowns and teams would choreograph celebrations, dances, different kind of things. And after a touchdown, it was almost like okay, what are they going to do kind of thing. And then they started doing like, oh, if you do a celebration too long, then it's a flag. You do this too long, it's a flag. It's almost like got to that Key and Peele skit where you got three pumps, do one more, and it's a flag. Um, and it's something that's definitely something that needs to get taken care of, but we'll see. We'll see if it happens.
Definitely, definitely. But Doug, you got anything else you want to add on to this game before we head out here?
The only thing that I will say is I liked what I seen from CD at the end of the game. When they lost, you seen him tap his chest and was like, "This one's on me," because you seen him have a few critical drops at the end. You seen him slip and the Eagles should have had a pick and that should have been the game. Um, and but I like to see that kind of professionalism from CD and own up to, hey, this one's on me, but I'll be here to make sure to right this wrong. Every player has a game where they're like, I want that back and everything. But it's a couple drops away, from what this game could have been. With Dallas coming out as a victor. But you like to see your star player have ownership and say, "Hey, this one's on me, my bad." And I'm pretty sure when he goes to the podium, he's going to say, "I wish I could have had some of those back." And you like to see that out of your star players.
Definitely, I fully agree with you. And CD's always been a leader. I will give him that much. As talented of a receiver as he is, top five in my personal opinion. He's a leader amongst men. Same with Dak Prescott. You can love him, you can hate Dak Prescott. You can love, you can hate CeeDee Lamb. Those two are leaders, and they definitely both had. Well, let me separate them two for a second. CD had a game where he definitely had moments where you said to yourself, "This is the CD that we're used to seeing," and then you had others where you see four drops and you say to yourself, we can't have that. We as an offense cannot afford to have that, considering the fact that there's going to be a lot of games where it's going to be a shootout, and we can't have those simple, in my opinion, mental errors, really come out, considering the fact that, we have an error here, we have an error there. That's two drives where we could have scored and we didn't, and we just lost this game by a touchdown. We could have probably scored on one of those drives. But I really like the leadership and poise of CD Lamb. I think that he'll bounce back from this. Hopefully not against the Giants in week two, but wouldn't be shocked if that were to happen either. But
Yeah, I will
I feel
say
you.
before we go, I will say I do think it is a situation that is a very good presence for a guy like Pickens to be in. That has had some on the side issues, some hot headed temperness issues. To be around a guy like CD that can own up to his mistakes, that could be a leader, that could be you know that voice of reason in the locker room, and even a guy like Dak. I think those guys for George to be around will be very good for him to learn on how to be a pros pro, because right now he's had several issues with his attitude and on the field you know hot headedness, and I think being around a guy like CD and Dak will definitely he'll definitely benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll absolutely benefit from it. Having those guys around him, I mean, why wouldn't you be able to? And if you can't benefit from it, I really don't know what to say. I think you're in a good situation where you have some people who can really get you on the right track. I think Dak is overhated in my honest opinion. I think he's a good man. I think that he is a very good leader, especially in that locker room. Knowing that you have Jerry Jones meddling, knowing you have Jerry Jones, uh, really just that's a whole other conversation. I give Dak a lot of credit for the stuff that he has to tolerate out there in Arlington, Texas. Um, but we're gonna ride out here. Appreciate you guys coming into our first ever live stream, a late night live stream reacting to the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Dallas Cowboys 24-0, kicking off week one of the NFL season. Tomorrow we have the Kansas City Chiefs playing the I believe it's the Chargers tomorrow. Correct me if I'm right.
In Brazil,
The
in
Chargers.
Brazil.
All right, awesome. And we'll definitely be live for that one. I think that's going to be similar today. I think that's going to be an exciting game, and I think there's a lot to look forward to that game. But before we head out here, Doug, you have anything else you want to say to the chat before we head out?
No, I'm just blessed to be here with you guys. Blessed to talk football again, and it's great to have football back and ready to just start dumping this out left and right.
Definitely. I'm there with you. We're absolutely going to have more content as the season goes. Looking forward, to really seeing where this channel goes. I'm very excited to see the growth of this channel. And we're excited to have you guys there along with us as we go through the NFL season because we're going to have a lot to talk about. But again, see you guys tomorrow for the Chiefs and the Chargers post game reaction. But until then, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment as well. We'll see you guys